Welcome to another Friends of Israel Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one, the only, Mr. Steve Herzig. We even have little titles under our names now, Steve. See, you can't see it, but it says the Jewish sage.
Does that mean it's true?
It's got to be. It's labeled.
Well,
You're
as
labeled.
the Jewish sage, I've been contemplating, and I need to ask you a question. You know, in my new world of retirement, I came across a article about a woman. Her name is Sharon Lane, Chris.
Okay.
She's 77 years old, and Sharon Lane is going to live the next 15 years in a cruise ship.
A cruise ship.
A cruise ship. She paid $129,999.
Wait, how old is this person?
77.
Okay.
She lives in California, retired school teacher. But she said, I took $129,999, and I'm paying $2,999. Somehow people think that if you don't say $3,000, you just lower it by
that
$1. It's such a deal. Okay, so $3,000 a month. And here's what she said. I buy the cabin, I live in the cabin, and that's it. That's it.
It's true.
For the next 15 years, she is guaranteed to be on this cruise ship and doesn't have to do. Would you do something like that?
You know, I don't think I could do something like that. Number one, I'm married, and I know my wife has zero desire to be on a cruise. Zero. So the likelihood of me taking our retirement and going on a boat and setting sail. I also, see, you and I are in two different boats, if you will, because I have young kids, and one day I'll retire. You are retired, and you have grandkids. And would you go on a boat?
I'm married to a woman who won't go on a cruise either.
Now, I've done a cruise, and I've met people who hop from cruise to cruise. They do cruise hopping. Oh, yeah. Exactly what this person said. It's cheaper to live on a cruise ship than it is to buy a home in retirement and to keep it up and to buy food. They feed you. You live in a room. And she goes, I'm getting off at this port, and I'm getting on another boat and going over here.
It would make me crazy. I don't think I could do it, but I understand living in in California. It's cheaper. $3,000 a month.
Bada bing.
You're good to go. And 15 years, no one even knows if she'll have 15 years, but you pay month to month, right? So
I'm assuming, though, she has no worries in the world.
I have no
concerns,
idea.
No people.
They have a whole article. Will we include this in the show notes?
This will be in the show notes.
All right. Cheaper than living in California. And that's where I got this. And I began to think about it. Not for myself. I wonder, does this appeal? So you're younger. Obviously, you're not going to retire for a long time.
Does it appeal to you?
No. No. I understand it.
How about
economically, it does appeal to me.
How about this? Let me ask you this. Let's say you and Alice sell the home that you're in. You're downsizing, okay? And let's say you've got an extra 20 grand that you can spend, and it will get you 6 months on the boat. Would you do that? Would you do 6 months on that boat as it jumps around from port to port?
My wife, I've already talked to her about cruising. She said, do that with your next one. So that answers your question.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she's not interested in any of, I have lots of people who I know have taken a cruise. And, Alice and I have never really gone on a vacation. That doesn't, I'm not asking people to feel sorry for me, but a vacation in the American, idea of what a vacation is. You get up, the two of you go to a place that the reason you're there is to vacation. You're strictly tourists. That's why you're there. You spend a week wherever it is, and then you come back.
Yeah.
Never have done that. We go to family things. When the kids were home, we lived in Chicago. We had to travel to Connecticut. I spoke in churches. We stayed at her mom's house. We were gone one time we were gone almost a month.
Yeah.
So speaking in churches, all that, it was fun. It was out of what I normally did. Even when the kids got older, Alice and I have been to Israel, Poland, Germany. We've been to England. But we've always done it to either visit England when our son Jonathan was in the Air Force, or Germany.
Yeah.
And we visited
Shayna and Mike.
We visited Shayna in England. Yep. Scotland, actually. But the point is, we've never taken a vacation. It's either family or ministry. And I thank God for that, because I've been to places that I would have never gotten to see or experience, but not because I vacationed there, but because I had the opportunity and the privilege of ministering there. So
would you take a cruise ship there?
Our friends in Australia find it cheaper to board a cruise ship and stop at various ports where there's churches. And when I was in Australia, I got schooled in this procedure by our now retired representative. And he told me, we get on a cruise ship, we book it for a week. Wherever it stops, I had already lined up speaking engagements. We leave, speak in the church, come back. Meals are provided. We go to the next stop. We don't have to drive. It's cheaper to do. So it's interesting.
That is very interesting. All right, so Steve, people can get on a cruise ship, and I'd be interested to know, because our listeners can text us at 424-444-1948. Let us know if you're somebody.
Yeah, would you do it? Would you take 15 years in your senior years and just say, I'm $130,000 down, $3,000 a month. I buy it, and Freilach, I'm done.
Would you do that? 424 1948. Hey, listen, and while you're texting there, if we actually have a great opportunity for you to get some stickers for free, people. If you got to spend $3,000 a month and $150,000 or $30,000 down, why not take stuff for free at that point? We want to send you free stickers.
You need to take stuff for free at that point.
That's right. I mean, that's what you're living on, the free meals, the free this.
That's right.
Well, we want to give you free stickers so that when you're on your cruise ship, you can stick them on your water bottle, you can stick them on your endless soda cup. You know what I'm talking about, Steve? People, they buy the soda package. You know what the soda package is?
I have no idea.
Well, instead of buying a soda every time, you spend 50, 60, I don't know what it could be now. Last time I went on a cruise was 2006 or something. So I think it was $40, and they'll give you a cup, and you can refill soda.
Well, that's interesting, because years ago I talked to a person who took his family on a cruise, and, they take your credit card. This was back then, whatever they do now. And he said he got a $500 charge for Coke.
Yeah, no, 100. That's if you don't get the package.
Well, evidently, back then they didn't have such a package. So now, back then it was $50.
Yeah, $50 or $40 or something like that. And when you're a seminary student, that's like $1 billion. Yeah. So, but I'll tell you, when we left that cruise,
you were drinking soda like nobody's business.
I split it with a friend, so 2020. But I'll say, when we left that cruise, I think it cost us, the reason we did it was like $175 for 3 nights going up and down the California coast. Okay, bupkis, nothing, and food, the whole spiel. So we're checking out, because you give them your credit card. So when we're checking out, the people in front of us had like a $3,000 or $4,000 bill. And I'm going, what? I started getting nervous, thinking, is this where they gouge us? They get us here. Well, we didn't buy anything other than the soda package. They bought other things, okay?
A lot of other
things. But all that to say, if you're on your cruise ship, wherever you are, maybe you get a sticker that supports Israel and the Jewish people, and you can slap it on whatever cup or Bible or whatever you've got to show that you love and support Israel and the Jewish people.
We have 5 different stickers.
That's right.
We send them 50. So that's 10 each of one of our 5 different stickers. And one had, remember somebody said that they had trouble. That was last week when we were doing Equip. A woman in Northern Ireland, you were in there, Bruce Scott's teaching the Equip course, and she said, I did have some trouble with my sticker. Because in Northern Ireland, you're not allowed to have a flag of anything else. No, I'm telling you the truth. And so she had a flag. Somebody complained. So she said, she was wrong. They told her, don't bring it back again. But she said,
what did she put it on?
She had it on a cup, some cup or water bottle.
So you can't have a flag?
In Northern Ireland, you cannot even have a Northern Ireland flag, according to her.
What?
Because it's too controversial. So she took off the Israeli flag, the support, and put pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
There you go.
So she had another sticker.
She was
'cause
ready.
We provide 5 different ones, and no one has said anything.
And that went to Northern Ireland.
That was We send them anywhere. So we have pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We have I love Israel. We have God bless Israel. We have Israel forever. We even have one with no words on it, Chris. It's a heart in the shape of the Israeli flag.
That's the one that got her in trouble, probably.
Probably. And it has the Star of David right in the middle.
That's right. Okay, so if you want 50 free stickers, we want to send them to you for free. All you have to do is go to, or text us, at 424-444-1948. Steve, I've got phone numbers. I've got websites all jammed into my brain. So 424-444-1948. All right,
Chris,
Steve.
we did have a great thing at Equip, and Equip sponsors the Friends of Israel Jew and Gentile podcast, which we're glad about. And Bruce Scott did a great job explaining to us Judaism today. Mm-hmm. You know, Judaism is flux. It gives, and you get 3 Jewish people. The old joke is you get 2 Jewish people together, you get 3 opinions. That's old hat.
Yeah.
If you get 2 Jewish people together, first of all, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
Getting them together is good. But then, as we'll see, by the way, in our topic for today, our biblical topic, there's vast difference what people believe. And so last week, Bruce opened us up, great class, and somebody from Northern Ireland was on and loves Equip.
There you go.
And got our stickers.
So if you want to be a part of an ever-growing community of Christians from all around the world, as Steve is highlighting here, who are learning the Bible from a Jewish perspective to be equipped to love the Jewish people, then I want to encourage you to go to FOIEquip.org. FOI is in Friends of Israel, FOIEquip.org. And there you can register.
Become an equipper.
Yeah,
that's the first thing that comes up. It's so annoying. I am an equipper. And every single time you get on that website, you got to click the X at the upper part because become an equipper. I am an equipper. Don't I get an advantage of going onto the thing and not having that become an equipper?
You know, you're so funny. You're the one selling this product, and yet at the same time, you're the one putting the product down.
I love the product.
I don't know if I've ever met anybody like that before. That's like, everybody become this. But you know what I hate? I hate our website. Because
I don't hate. Once you become an equipper, is it possible in a world where a 30,000 bunker busting bomb wipes out the nuclear thing in Iran, wouldn't you think, okay, I'm an equipper, that thing won't come up anymore?
I don't.
Don't you think that's fair?
Look, I don't.
How many times can I be an equipper?
What more can I do right now?
I'm trying to equip. I'm happy to equip, but I don't need it anymore. What can I tell you?
Okay, well, all you have to do is go to FOIEquip.org, and if you're already an equipper, just hit the X button.
That's what you have to do.
That's what those guys did when they dropped the bomb. They hit the button and it fell.
Right.
Is it that? They still had to hit a button.
For the button.
It's right there. Go to FOIEquip.org, become an equipper for free, and sign up for Bruce Scott's class, Judaism Today.
It'll be a lot calmer than this.
I don't know. It all depends. Are you going to start talking?
But Chris, I sent you a video because I thought this topic was one. It's fundamental. It is the fundamental topic for both Jews and Christians. Mm-hmm. And in fact, as a Jewish person, this was the fundamental foundation stone that ultimately, 22 years after I was born, but growing up in a Jewish home, going to Hebrew school, this was the question that haunted me and finally had answered when I was 22. Let's hear the rabbi's perspective on this.
You got it.
Raised is, what does Judaism say about the significance of what Christianity terms the original sin, namely the sin of Adam and Eve, eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge in contravention of God's divine commands. Let me say at the outset that, number one, although the Christian idea is very, very different than the Jewish idea, it is totally based on a concept that is at least analogous in Judaism. And we, in fact, do believe that the original sin had a cosmic repercussions, was an extremely significant event. Adam and Eve were created as perfect beings who were totally connected to God.
I'd agree with that.
And the sin created an unbridgeable distance, a chasm,
I'm right
a
with them. This is
separation.
what I learned.
Yeah.
So far, we and the Christians are walking on the same path. But at this point, we now differ and we now switch directions. Christianity sees original sin as an irrevocable, unchangeable blight on the holiness of the human soul, creating an impossibility of connecting to God other than faith in Jesus, etc.
Jesus, etc. That's his new last name.
Etc.
We believe that the essence of man's divine soul remains untainted. It remains holy. It remains unified with God. It remains radiant. What the sin introduced was kind of a secondary soul that the Tanya and the books of Kabbalah refer to as the animal soul, in which
notice he's moving away from the Bible and into extra biblical things.
That's right, exactly.
Negative drives of egotism, selfishness, hedonism, that are kind of pulling us away, imprisoning us.
This is the concept of inclinations,
very, very
not
to achieve the
in
communion,
us, right? Embedded in us, but
godly
inclinations
soul
that draw us away from
still desires
holiness.
to achieve. So as a result, instead of looking at man as hopelessly irredeemable, Judaism has a very, very hopeful vision, because it basically says, listen, the holiness that you were born with, the holiness that was put into Adam, is still there. There is a drive that can be pulling you away, but you have the freedom, you have the capacity.
Now they're going to, you can do it. You can do it. It's like a pep talk.
And perfection and communion with God. So as a result, Judaism, on one hand, does remind us that we have many, many negative forces within us that we have to fight. Judaism is realistic. We don't assume that we are already in a state of perfection. On the other hand, Judaism teaches us that if God gave us the challenge, God also gave us the wherewithal to be able to surmount that challenge.
All right.
It's all about what we can do.
Exactly. Chris, I'll tell you what, all through my high school years, that was always in the back of my head. That's why I said, I can't follow the law. God is holy. I am not. I'm condemned to hell. And that's I wasn't self-pity. I was young. I figured that's just the way it is. I felt it was a long way away, and that's life. Well, when I first started to read the text, let me give you a verse, Chris, and you can comment on it. Because to me, this verse, probably after Isaiah 53, helped me understand what we're talking about here. It's found in Genesis chapter 5 and in verse 3. And it says this, and Adam lived 130 years. This is obviously after the fall. He lived 130 years and begot a son, and here it is, in his own likeness, after his image. Now,
not the image of God.
I'm not the mathematician here. I just know that in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and he put animals, birds, fish, and man and woman. This takes place after the fall. So Adam was created in God's image. Eve was created from the man who was at that time in the image of God, and she gets swallowed into that, made from man, but from God, and no sin. But after sin, every child born is after the image of their parents. Every single one, starting with here. Seth is the first one, and every other one. And so if you stick to the text, I understand the Talmud and the Zohar and all these extra biblical explanations. And look, Judaism at its core is a moral religion. It's moral. They preach the Ten Commandments, the law, that very good. But their crux is you can do it.
Yep.
The text here tells me, you know what? This is very Jewish. Somebody says, Steve, you're a sinner. I say, you're right, but it's not my fault. What do you mean it's not your fault? It's my parents. They gave it to me. And by the way, my kids could say the same thing. And your mother and father gave you the sin nature. Do we solely blame them? No, they can keep blaming and blaming and blaming and go all the way back to the original two. And Chris, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, Genesis chapter 5 and verse 3, made in the image of fallen man, it brought us the predicament. And to add to that another layer, let's talk about the battle that God has, the program of God that started, and we don't have a timeline. We're not sure, and scholars place it different places. But in Isaiah 14 and in Ezekiel 28, we deal with this person, Satan.
Yeah.
Lucifer. And that's a background that plays into all this.
Can I add to, it's interesting that he doesn't highlight in the law.
You're talking about the rabbi.
The rabbi, yeah. Yep. In the law shows us something about the human nature to me. And it comes from...
Oh, man, does it.
And it's not just the fact that you can't keep it. It's beyond that, almost. It's, okay, so we can't keep the law perfectly. But it's even beyond that, because there's that passage that I've been really invested in lately in Leviticus chapter 10, verses 10 and 11, after Nadab and Abihu offer an unauthorized fire, and God's divine holiness consumes them. And then Moses loses his mind. Aaron, I always feel bad for Aaron, loses his sons. It actually says that he kept his peace, which almost is like he just kept whatever he was dealing with emotionally about losing his sons. I'm sure that wrecked him, inside. So he kept his peace. And then the Lord speaks to Moses and says, from now on, the priest's job is not just to give offerings and sacrifices. It's also the priest's job to teach and to distinguish between the things that are holy and common and between the things that are clean and unclean. And I think it's very fascinating that if Israel or anybody, but Israel in that moment in the law, is left to their druthers, if they're left to just all by themselves without any information, they are always in the state of common and always in the state of being unclean. Why? You didn't even do anything wrong. You touched a dead body. In life, people die. You gave birth, exactly what you were supposed to do. Be fruitful and multiply. And that makes you unclean. You touch the blood of an animal that or whatever. That makes you unclean.
You wake up in the morning in ceremonial washings. You're unclean after you sleep.
The idea in the law is that all you have to do is normal things that even God tells you to do. You're still unclean until you, purify yourself a certain number of days, a certain number of hours, and then you're fit to come before a holy God. And even then, you're still not in the status of holy. You're only in the status of clean and common. Only the high priest was ever in the status of holy, Kodesh. And so, again, even in the law, there's this image of left to yourself, you're just unclean. And there's no way for you to ever approach a holy God unless God tells you how to do it and gives you the ability to be purified. That, to me, shows that this rabbi, as much as I appreciate his opinions, he's saying, left to yourself, you can fix things on your own. And I'm saying, and I think you're saying too, that's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, you're always unclean and you're always common without Christ.
We have a interview that takes place with a rabbi, a Bible scholar, to put Jewish spin on original sin. And one of the questions asked him is, how did you come to be interested in the notion of original sin as it relates to Judaism? And he says, ever since I've been teaching at Jewish seminaries, one of my principal responsibilities has been to teach traditional Jewish biblical commentary, both in the early rabbinic period and even more so in the medieval and early modern periods. What stands out is that Jews are always processing external influences, either attacking or internalizing them, or somehow adapting them in the late Gershom Shalem's called creative assimilation. I love that.
That's good, yeah.
We are the masters of assimilation. I got more stories. One of the most interesting features of traditional Jewish thought is the question of limits. What can you adopt from your environment, and where do you draw the line? The doctrine of original sin is a peculiar case of something that is sometimes attacked and sometimes adapted. When Jews nowadays ask themselves what are the basic ideological differences between Judaism and Christianity, one of the most prominent differences that many Jews will cite is the doctrine of original sin, which really gets down to basic anthropology.
It's true.
This is
So
really
true.
good. What is basic human nature according to Jewish teaching and according to Christian teaching? That is the bottom line, Chris. And I think the Bible, if you stay in the text of the Bible, it clearly does not say that everyone's born holy. In fact, as the story unfolds,
It gets worse and worse.
Gets worse and worse. Where is the example of anyone who always does the right thing, who is always holy? Well, that's the whole story. The Older Testament text explains why or how things are so awful using the nation of Israel, but all through the hope of that person who will come to take care of business, to use your vernacular.
Yep. Can I, when you're talking about this too, a couple episodes ago, we talked about the fact that there is conservatives are more happy. And the reason why they're more happy is because they understand almost the idea of human nature, that conservatives have come to the realization that we are people who are sinful almost. The conservative evangelical Christian, the conservative whatever, however you want to phrase it, where the liberal mentality or more progressive mentality is that we can actually build a utopia. We're actually good people inside, which is exactly what the rabbi is saying. And I have this conversation with my neighbor. I teach him about original sin. And I think from the moment a baby cries, there's sin. The sin is in them. It's in their DNA. He goes, no. No, we're good. We're all good. And sometimes we do bad things. And I say, no, we're all bad. And sometimes we do good things.
Exactly.
And you know what? That shapes, when he talks about anthropology, it also bleeds into psychology, and it bleeds into all these other things, into how even people separate themselves out into different groups. Because if I really believe deep down we're all bad, and you know what? We do some good things, which is, I think, what Romans chapter 1 and 2 says. That's going to radically shape the way that you see the world, compared to people who go, no, we're all really good people, we just do some bad things. That's going to radically shape the way that you approach everything in life as well. And so, again, you can kind of see how Christians can even separate from a Jewish mentality on original sin because of those approaches to everyday life. It's not just a theological concept. It's everyday life that I live, knowing that the moment my daughter was born, I told my wife, I think she's manipulating us. Like, I think she knows what's going on. And my wife would get mad at me. Don't you say that. Don't say that. Like 10 years later, she goes, that girl's a manipulator. She's been manipulating us for 10 years, You just know it. You can feel it and see it. Why? It's woven into our DNA.
It's in the DNA. It's in the DNA. And the Bible, as you read it progressively, gives us hope, and then finally directs us to the person who fixes us.
That's exactly right.
He fixes the original sin. And all this time, remember, it started with an evil creation of God, and that's a higher than us, deciding on his own that he wanted to be equal with God. And again, I realized that I remember when, before I became a Christian, the idea of Satan, Judaism doesn't talk a lot about Satan. And certainly when you do talk about it, it becomes like a science fiction movie or horror movie. But the Bible starts in chapter 3, it's there. And then you read Isaiah and Ezekiel and you learn the background of it. And you go to the last book and you realize that this whole thing is a battle between God and Satan and God's creation. God made man. Satan didn't make us fall, but we fell because of that temptation. And Jesus is the one that is the fixer of it. And the culmination ends in Revelation. It's just, this is an amazing story. Sometimes you could get depressed because you're saying, wait a minute, we're just like pawns in this battle between God and Satan. I wouldn't word it that way, but I understand why somebody would say that, because the battle is between God and Satan, and man's the one. We could be blessed if we follow what God says. We'll be in trouble if we follow what Satan wants us to do.
100%. This is an interesting topic on original sin in Judaism
it's
and
the hub
Christianity.
of discussions. And yet it's not really, it's assumed. I've talked to my Jewish friends who don't know the Lord, and the philosophy that they've been given is the same philosophy I was given, but they're holding on to it. You know what? God will, I've heard this from several. God will understand. Well, God does understand. And he's given an opportunity to do something about it. The rabbi would say we can do something. Yes, we can. We can follow, especially if you're born Jewish. If you're born Jewish, what Paul asks, what advantage has the Jew? That's a lot. What advantage has the Jew? Much in every way. For to us we're given the oracles of God.
Yep, exactly.
So that's
what
why
to do.
What do you do? Go to your word. I remember so well. This is kind of reminiscing. When I got my Bible from my synagogue, I was bar mitzvahed, but then a few years later, as a 16-year-old, I was confirmed. And I was given a English Masoretic text, white leather. I've talked about my testimony. My sister got one as well. And the president of the synagogue said this as he handed it to our class: read this on a regular basis.
Wow.
What was he saying? To us, we're given the oracles of God. And if you read it, just at least read it, you'll see the story, the narrative that unfolds, and you'll have no trouble just start in chapter 1 and get to chapter 5, see what happened to Adam, and realize, wait, Seth is after Adam, not after God anymore. We have remnants of God's great work in us. We're wonderfully made, but we've got a lot of stuff in us from the fall, don't we, Chris?
100%. You know, I've just wrapped up this book that I've been reading by Paula Fredrickson, who is not an evangelical Christian. She would never claim to be a Christian. She's actually Jewish, I believe, and she teaches New Testament. And this book is called Paul, the Pagan's Apostle. And I love her premise on it. And she actually begins to talk about that matrix I was mentioning earlier, holy and common and clean and unclean. And she was highlighting the fact that, isn't it interesting that how does Paul have the ability to call pagans that were Gentiles who were once pagans holy, that to move them into the matrix that was once only reserved for the high priest that could approach God? Now all of a sudden Paul's calling these once pagans, and she calls it the apostles' the pagan's apostle, because sometimes when you say Gentile, it smooths things over. Ethne in Greek meant the pagan. You know, there's the Jew, and then there's all those other people out there that believe in who knows what God.
They weren't given the oracles of God.
Exactly. And so they were following other gods, idols, and all of a sudden they begin to follow Jesus, and they start following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And not only is it that the fact that there were a lot of Gentiles that followed the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They admired Yahweh, the Jewish God. But it isn't until Jesus comes that now even those pagans that were once far off are now called holy ones, saints. And the idea of holy ones is Kodesh, which goes back to that passage. So even when we think about original sin, God not only provides a way for the Jewish person to find salvation in Jesus and to be called holy, that's what forces us into that passage Hebrews talks about going boldly before the throne of God, that we can walk right into the Holy of Holies. How can you do that? That's because God takes your original sin through the work of Jesus and forgives you and clothes you with his righteousness and enables you to be holy, set apart, even not just the Jewish person, but the once pagan who would be way out there in the unclean world, brings them close and gives them the ability to walk right into the throne of God, which is just amazing. Amazing.
It is amazing. And I've heard Jewish people talk about believers as friends of Israel. You probably heard it too, where they'll say to a Gentile believer with friends of Israel or somebody at church, and they'll say, oh, you know more about the Bible than I do. You know more about my own Bible than I do. And number two, they'll say, you're such a great person. I wish I could be like you. Yeah. Haven't you heard that before?
100%, yes.
And what they're saying is, it's a compliment. They're seeing not us. They're seeing God in us. They're seeing the redemptive work of Christ in us, and the aura that we give off, if you will, is a Christ-like aura.
And that, again, that whole mentality of we're in the video, he's saying we have the ability to make ourselves better.
Yep.
Where the reality that we have is a hope that's built on that one day these bodies will go from corruptible to incorruptible, from mortal to immortal. They'll be changed in a twinkling of an eye, but there's still that original sin. There's still that sin that drives our flesh, that wars with the Spirit of God that's in us. And you know what? What gives us that happiness, despite you would think that the people, Steve, with original sin, that meant that theology, would be depressed people. But we're the ones that are the happiest people because we have a hope. And the hope is that, number one, this isn't forever. And number two, I have been changed. And I am being changed more into the image, conformed into the image of the Son, Jesus. And so that hope is what drives, I believe, the happiness, despite the fact that we believe the worst thing possible. You're a bad person. I'm sorry. I'm a bad person. But there's hope that through Christ, we are made good in who
You know
he
that
is.
hymn, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' love and righteousness. So that's what it is.
100%.
Well, listen, speaking of that and Jewish people, the news item that we have is actually Sweet Home Alabama.
You love Alabama.
I love Alabama.
I love Alabama too. I think
Our international vice president is from Alabama, a rocket scientist turned theologian. But Bruce Pearl, the coach of the Auburn Tigers basketball team, college basketball team.
Now, you got to be careful if you love Alabama because you have to choose your team.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you a Roll Tide or are you a War Eagle?
I love Alabama. It doesn't matter which.
Got to know who you're talking to.
That's 100% true. But we have Mamdani in New York, who is
Mamdani.
Sorry, Mr. Mamdani. Sorry.
Are you sorry?
I am sorry. I don't want to mispronounce somebody's name, but
he has interesting things to say about Jewish people.
Oh, yeah, he does. A lot of things. But Bruce Pearl takes the approach as a Jewish man and somebody of influence, and he's not afraid to use his influence. He's supported Israel and is very vocal about it. But he said he gives in this article, which comes from the New York Post. He gives in this how he, as a Jewish man down south, was received so well. He loves the South. And he said, I've been received as a Jewish man. New Yorkers could benefit from some Sweet Home Alabama.
And that's big because a lot of times when people think about the South, what comes to mind is racism, anti-Semitism. It almost feels like the South is the... where it all originates and it must have stayed down there forever. But here he's saying, as the Auburn coach, which is a big position as well.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong when you're the Auburn basketball coach. But that for him, it's a great place to live.
I could tell you the first time I went down south, this was, years ago, probably 35 years ago, I was telling my parents, I'm going to Alabama. And my mother said, are they making you go? Really? I said, what do you mean? She said, South? She said, they hate Jews in the South. And so I said, well, Mom, they're asking me to speak, and a church has invited me. And she said, oh, I don't know if I would. She went back all the way to where there were many Southerners who didn't like Jews. Anyway, I've always been received well. I love the South. And the people down there, they love the Jewish people. Not all of them, but certainly a good majority. And Bruce Pearl, not a Christian, Jewish guy, says, you know what? They have treated me so well, I received so well. Anyway, sweet home Alabama.
He said, I've spent the past 2 decades living in the American South and barnstorming every major city and college town as a men's basketball coach in the Southeastern Conference. Alabama, like much of the South, has a lot to teach the left. First and foremost, Alabamians are religious people. Their adherence to the Judeo-Christian traditions foster caring, committed, and prosperous communities. Moreover, ever since I moved to Alabama, I've been welcomed like family. I haven't sensed a whiff of anti-Semitism, and I've been treated with profound respect by my evangelical brothers and sisters.
Amen and amen. All right, that's good. But Chris, I have a video for you.
Yes, I got to bring up that video.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah, I'm the one who's working. Why don't you set the video up, Steve?
Okay. What we have here is a discovery of ancient Shiloh location of what you and I were kind of surprised, a permanent tabernacle.
That's right.
I had, up until this point, I confess, anytime I thought of the tabernacle, I read David Levy's book on the tabernacle. We publish it at FOI here, and it's the first moving prefab building. It can move. The Levites moved it. But here in Shiloh, it was there for 400 years. And there was a discovery, Chris, and let's play the video.
Yep, let's play it. Here we go.
In 2019, CBN News interviewed Dr. Scott Stripling, the director of the excavation going on in ancient Shiloh. 4 years later, Stripling brought us up to speed on what's happened here since we first visited this project. Tell us, we were there at season 1. What's new? What's happened since then?
Well, in season
Can I just highlight, Stripling is actually an evangelical Christian. So all the dig that's going on in Shiloh right now is run through his archaeological organization, Dr. Stripling's. But he's an evangelical Christian, and a lot of the people who come to dig there in Shiloh are evangelical Christians. And so this is a big project, and I love seeing that Bible-believing Christians. You know, archaeology is a funny thing because sometimes you're going to have people who don't believe anything about the Bible. But his entire approach to Shiloh is, of course, built on, you know, we have to see what the rocks tell us here. At the same time, built on what the scriptures teach as well, which is a dynamic change in a lot of what archaeology happens in Israel.
Our hypotheses were just formulating. We thought that we had a monumental building up here from the pier to the tabernacle. We thought that this could be a gate complex because there was no glacis in this section. Since then, we've come way down, 5 meters or so, maybe 6 meters in some places. And so now we can see the various structures that are here, and indeed we can now say that this is very likely the gate that's referred to in the Bible. And that's pretty big stuff.
And what happened at the gate? Why is this so important?
Well, the Bible tells us that Eli is in the gate of Shiloh when he gets the news that the Ark of the Covenant has been captured, that his sons have been killed. He falls over backwards and dies in
They're
the
right
gate.
there
So
where
it's
he
a
died.
function
crazy.
that's mentioned in the Bible, so we were very curious if we would come across it.
Shiloh is not only where Eli lived and died, but also the place where Joshua divided the promised land between the 12 tribes. Where Hannah prayed for a son who became the prophet
Isn't that amazing?
Samuel.
It really is.
Where the
Right, and
tabernacle of the
they're
Lord
uncovering
stood
it right
for
now.
nearly
Yep.
400 years. Stripling gave us a tour of the site and took us to perhaps their most significant discovery.
This is where you came to connect with God. Jerusalem remains a pagan city for another 300 years. The Ark is here, the tabernacle is here, and this is where you came to connect with God.
And you believe you've found actually the tabernacle.
Well, you know, I'm not ready to say I know for certain, but I'll tell you what we do.
He goes
have
on to
is a
say,
building-
Steve, that in my mind, I've always thought what happened is that you end up, the tabernacle structure, the tent gets moved into the land and gets plopped down eventually in Shiloh. And that's where all the events took place. And
Yep.
the Ark of the Covenant would get moved out and moved back in. Remember, a lot of times they'd use them in the Ark of the Covenant in battle. It'd go before the people. The idea of God going before the people to win the battle. And now Stripling comes back and he's saying that they've found physical building structures that that show that this would have been. He's actually saying this is the Holy of Holies, but it's actually a building. And then there's the wall, and then it would partition out the holy room where the menorah would have been, and the incense altar, and so it kind of surprised me. I do remember talking to people who, this is a couple of years this dig's been going on, and when I talked to people a couple of years ago about it, they believe the thing they were looking for were administrative buildings. Because if the tabernacle was that significant to the people of Israel, then sure enough, the high priest, now again, in my mind, the tent was still there, but they would have said around the tent would have been administrative buildings where the high priest would have had his office and events would have taken place and things like that. And so ultimately, what he's saying is, no, there was almost like a partial building that could have been built. You even did a little research on this as well.
Well, when you watch the video, we don't have time to show the whole thing, but you'll put a link there so people could watch it. The argument is going to be that it was semi-permanent, that it was the tabernacle, but there's an actual place that's dug out from where the tabernacle sat, because it was there for a long time. I just think it's another example of the text. We believe the Bible. Thank God. I would never want to be an archaeologist. Looking here doesn't make me want to do that.
You don't want to do it?
No,
I love that kind of stuff.
Not interested in dirt, and oh look, I found a chip of a vase. I know, but I'm rejoiced that there's scholarly people who follow the text and then we're able to verify what we already believe to be true.
And they also, one of the big indications that that's where the tabernacle would have been was because as you continue on and watch the video, they found basically the equivalent of a graveyard of bones. And
the right side.
That's right. And the face, the right side, which is the portion for the priest, is cut off, and it's only half the face. It's only half of it, and that was the portion for the priest, as you would bring your fellowship offerings. And
the left
peace
side
offerings.
was all offered to the Lord.
Exactly, and so all that is in
that alone that's overwhelming evidence.
And it's some deep, deep cavern of bones that would have just been.
Hey, we're hungry people. What can I tell you?
You got to make a full out. We got to make your shawarma while you're there.
That's right. That's right. Well, Chris, the last news item is significant. As we're recording right now, Benjamin Netanyahu has already been with President Trump, and Netanyahu has put in his name. I don't know who you put your name in for.
I was thinking the same thing.
Where do you go? Is there like a email? Hey, I vote for this guy for Nobel Prize winner.
Like a form you fill out? What's going on?
So that's what he's doing. But you actually sent this to me from the Wall Street Journal.
This is big.
A new Palestinian offer for peace with Israel. Why don't you explain?
Well, this is big. I just wrote an editorial for the Harbinger's Daily about this, which hopefully should be coming out pretty soon. But Hebron's Sheikhs proposed to leave the Palestinian Authority and join the Abraham Accords. So here's what's happening. As all of these nations are looking to, Arab nations, Middle Eastern nations are looking to join the Abraham Accords, okay? They're thinking about it. Saudi Arabia, I know I've heard Qatar and Oman are considering it as well. So as all these nations from the outside are looking to join the Abraham Accords, there's, the reality is that there are certain Palestinians, not all of them, that are going, hey, all these other Arab nations are winning. They're winning the day by partnering with Israel. And here we are, we're still holding our fist up, acting like all of the people who were once helping us have now turned their back on us. Really, Palestinians, their only friend in the Middle East after 2020 with the Abraham Accords, it was Qatar and Iran, and they were turning to Iran. Now Iran is bupkis. And so what's happening? You hear the sheiks going, we're not going to, notice they're not going to go to the United Nations. They sent a letter to Nir Barkat, who's the economy minister, to talk to Benjamin Netanyahu about not building a Palestinian state, but creating a emirate of Hebron that would actually be a part of the Abraham Accord. So not one big Palestinian state, but just Hebron that's in a peaceful relationship, diplomatic relationship with Israel. It's a game changer.
Chris, this is the first time that I can remember, and being my age, you don't remember much, but it says here, quote, you said this, but we want cooperation with Israel, says Sheikh Wadi al-Jabari.
Yeah, we want cooperation.
We want with Israel. That's the quote. You said it, and that is amazing. That is amazing. And then thinking out of the box, Hebron to be this special location with an Arab Muslim motif, if you will, that Israel recognizes and they recognize Israel. It's amazing.
There are other articles that came out too. This is just one, though. The Wall Street Journal, the Times of Israel put a report out too, and certain quotes were coming from it from the sheikhs. And let me read two of them. First is a sheikh wrote this, Steve. A Palestinian sheikh wrote, "There will be no Palestinian state, not even in 1,000 years. After October 7th, Israel will not give it." That's coming from the sheikh.
He's right.
And then the last one is this. Another sheikh said, "To think only about making a Palestinian state will bring us all disaster." So not only is the fact that you see the sheikhs in Hebron that are saying we want to build a peaceful relationship with Israel, and they're not going to the UN. They're going to Jerusalem. That's big.
It's amazing.
Not only that, but you see the bigger picture is that Palestinian nationalism, that drive for a two-state solution to solve all the world's problems is not only dying in Israel, it's dying among the Palestinian citizens. The nationalism of a unified Palestinian people, which they're not, is dying. And so what happens? Now the clans are saying, we'll make peace with you. We want peace. We want diplomatic relations. We want security. We'll take care of all the terrorism. We want a peaceful, and this is big in Hebron because in Hebron is the Machpelah. There's a Jewish community in Hebron that go and worship. The Machpelah is where Abraham's
trouble has been there a long time by Rachel's tomb.
100%. And so there's a guy that's the head of the Jewish community there in Hebron. His name's Yishai Fleischer, and he promoted this. He on his Twitter account or X account, he said, "Take a look at what's going on in Hebron." So again, there's a lot of things that are changing. We could see a new Middle East, not only a new Middle East in the next 5-6 years, we could see a new Israel in the next 5 or 6 years.
It's amazing, and you'll include that in the show notes.
Bada bing.
All right, Chris. We got to play the music.
Yiddish word of the day. Yiddish word of the day.
The Yiddish word of the day is Neshama.
Neshome.
Neshome.
Sounds like a shampoo.
Soul. It's derived from the Hebrew word Neshama, which is soul. And we've been talking about original sin and the soul and the Jewish view versus the Christian view. And so a good soul, to say a good soul in Yiddish is Gute Neshama.
Gute Neshama.
So we believe you get a Gute Neshama with a kosher heart, Chris.
That's right.
And you could find that in Deuteronomy 30, Jeremiah 4, verse 4, and Romans chapter 2, verses 28 and 29. A circumcised heart, a kosher heart, only done by surgery through the Lord Jesus, brings us a relationship, God's righteousness, to him. We'll have a good soul.
Amen. Steve, you are being summoned to lunch. You've got to get out of here. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Listen, if you want to be...
My wife is right at the door now, literally.
She's pulling you out. That's right.
I gotta go.
All right, well, listen, if you want to be a part of Bruce Scott's Judaism Today class, right now, go to foiequip.org, and you can sign up. You'll see me on there this Thursday. You'll see Steve Herzig, I think, on there this Thursday. If his wife lets him, he's got to get out of here. Hey, be sure to go to foiequip.org to register. Also, don't forget, text me at 424-444.
1948.
There you go, 1948. We want to send you free stickers. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for being a part of the Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast, and we'll see you next week.